Okay, hey everyone. We are super excited to begin this very in-depth delve into the world of a very unknown world in art, which is glass blowing. And with our guest tonight, we're going to go into a much deeper perspective into glass blowing, because glass blowing in and of itself is a fascinating subject, but understanding what glass blowing means on more of the mystical aspect, especially from the type of town that both of us live in, there's so much to talk about over there. And so I am honored and delighted to have Sheva Chaya joining us today for what is going to be, for sure, a super interesting discussion into a lot of perspectives, not only in art, but in Kabbalah and ultimately in living, right? Because we're artisans in our own right, and life, I believe, is the greatest art form that we're here in this world to be creatives. So Sheva Chaya, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, doing awesome. Thank God. Thank God. So I love that studio behind you. I've been there a number of times, and every time I've been there, you've been with goggles and fire and doing these really cool contraptions of all types of incredible glass blowing magic, which I there's nothing less than that. So tell us about like how you got into glass blowing, and were you always into fire?
Right. So definitely was always into fire. If there's ever a bonfire, I wanted to make sure it was going well. I even have a wood stove going upstairs now in my house.
Nice.
And love fire. And really for me, glass blowing, it became a way to use fire in a productive way, which is really actually pretty amazing, because as we know, fire is not always productive. It has these aspects of both burning and bringing light. So literally, actually, with glass, it lights up and it brings the light. But we'll probably get into that stuff a bit more later. But more to your question, I heard about glass blowing when I was in college. I basically got into art through painting. I started with oil painting and just loved the experience of delving into color and just really focusing on details, or just looking at something deeply, like over and over again. To look at the details was just an incredible experience, really life-changing. And I just hadn't really done that before. And the colors are so beautiful, and the flow. And I was in college at Princeton, and I not the first place someone would go to learn art, but for me, it really just sparked. I had a teacher there, and sparked this love of art, and I said, I'm gonna focus on this. There's something I had a deep sense inside of me that I wanted to do something in the world, and that could manifest in a lot of different ways. I wouldn't have guessed it would have been art, but I felt by just how much I loved it, how much I was drawn to do it, and had this really strong will awakening inside of me. It just seemed very real and important, and potentially very powerful, to be able to reach people in interesting ways, in deep ways. So I went with it, and I've been doing art ever since. I switched to watercolor painting, and just was open to trying every kind of art. And like you said, like you brought up the question about fire. So I heard about glass blowing towards the end of my time in college, my senior year. I had some friends who were glass blowers, telling me about it, showing me pictures. And this was back in the day before, you could Google or YouTube anything and look it up and check it out and even learn it yourself. If you wanted to learn about something, you had to actually research it and find people and go meet them. So that's what I did when I graduated.
Put it on MapQuest and just have that whole direct, right? Yeah.
Yeah, like actually use maps. It was interesting. But yeah, that was this will. Nothing stands in the way of the will, as we know. And I really, I just wanted to check it out. And I very much wanted to come back to Israel when I graduated. That was, one of my clear goals, to come back to Israel as soon as I could, because I knew I had a lot to learn.
So
And
wait, can I just stop you for a second? Because this is all like
sure.
really fascinating. So you went to Princeton and you graduated in the history of arts. Is that it?
It was both. It was art history and
Art history.
also the plastic arts. So it was, I had a studio, and my thesis was an art show.
Interesting. So when you go into art history, I mean, there's such a rich tradition, that humanity has left for us, in these thousands of years. So I'm sure glass blowing like stood out in your studies in some form, in some way.
I would say it's interesting. It came around really later. The history of glass came up for me later. What they offered there at Princeton for the art history classes was much more, like the normal things that we would think of, the different phases of art, painting. I became very interested also in film and photography. So I learned a lot in that direction. I took a couple of classes specifically in looking into film, back in those days, like film, like the actual strip of film, and different ways that people would work with that. And I was super interested in that also. I still am. But I found myself always being drawn to doing something hands-on. And the art history classes, I felt it was interesting, kind of like a filler, interesting information in certain artists and techniques stood out to me. But for the most part, I was just always wanting to get to the studio and try to do art. That was where I was drawn to mostly. And then the actual, the history of glass blowing, once I started to get into glass blowing, it came up more, people would ask, and so I started to look into it more, this whole incredible history of glass, which I definitely am not an expert on it, but the aspects of it that have come through for me, it's super interesting. It's literally amazing to be located where I am here in Tzfat. We're about an hour away from Akko, the coast of Israel. The northern coast of Israel happens to be, historically one of the best types of sand to make glass, which is and there's incredible history that's come up. This is, just a few years ago, something incredible came up that they found, I think it was in 2016, they found a furnace from about 1600 years ago that's in that area near Akko, and there was still glass in it.
Sure.
So they took some of the glass and they sent it to the Technion to check out, the makeup of the glass, see what it was. And they checked it. And I know this story because I have a mentor / good friend teacher named Maestro Gianni Toso. So he's one of my, so he's, it's a whole story in itself, but he's, an Italian glass master who grew up in Murano and Venice. Both sides of his family were glass families, and back in the day, not so long ago, there were the secrets of glass blowing in Italy were kept secret, and they weren't shared at all, even between glass blowers. And he was basically like bred a glass blower. And so he has it, in his veins, and he became very interested in Judaism. He converted to Judaism. It was a whole incredible story that comes with him.
So he and I are very close. I reached out to you about him because I somehow learned about him, and I researched him. His name is Gianni Toso. And I was like, oh my God, this guy's like the master. And I'm and I asked you if you knew him, and you were like, yes, he's actually my mentor. And I thought that was so fascinating. I mean, the 700-year history that his family has, and it's all secret, and it's all learned through apprenticeship and mentoring and so I remember I reached out to you and you're like, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's actually, yeah, he's been a big influence. He's a big inspiration to lots of people, not just me, but I feel very blessed and lucky that I came to know him and learn from him. And just the reason why I know this story is because of him. So I heard about, they found this glass kiln near Akko, and they found glass in it. But he told me that the inside part of the story, that when they took that glass and checked it out of the Technion, it's a recipe, the different elements that make up the glass. And he knew someone involved in that, checking the glass. And the person who he knew, sent him what they found, this glass was made of. And he said it made him cry. Why would it make him cry? Because it's exactly the same recipe that these Italians used.
Wow.
So the Italian tradition goes back 800 years.
Yeah.
And this kiln found in Israel is 1600 years old. So what does that tell? I mean, this is like history, bursting open what people think about history. I'm sure a lot of people would not know what to do with this information, but he was very, very affected by that. Basically saying, it traces back even this Italian tradition, which is thought of as the glass tradition by many. It's only part of the story. This tradition traces back, that type of glass traces back to an hour away from here. Wow. Where they produced it. And there are many stories that go with that, but that aspect of history, jumped out, about 5 years ago. It's very, very significant,
that's amazing
information.
When I visited Caesarea this past summer, so we learned a tremendous amount about Herod. That was one of his main castles. I mean, he had a lot of castles around Israel, but there were artifacts that came out of that port that were exported all over the world. And one of the artifacts that they found was glass. So Israel became a glass capital, glass manufacturing capital that went out to the Roman Empire. And Rome, of course, is Italy. So I wouldn't be surprised if historically the Italian tradition traces back to Israel, like history proves, right? For
sure. Yeah, it's an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So Sheva Chaya, we're talking about history and we're talking about the know-how, but you find yourself in Tzfat, and every time again like that, I visit your amazing gallery there and seeing you not just create, talk about glass, but then you add that spiritual dynamic, that Kabbalistic aspect of what does it mean to actually blow glass. So can you speak about, first of all, like, what is it, like, for those of us that don't know about like what it takes to create like a glass. So this is machine made and whatever, but like, how would someone create this piece of glass? You have to bring your mouth to the whatever that tool is called, and to blow pipe, and then you create something out of it. And so first of all, what are the mechanics about that? And second of all, how does that spiritually resonate with you?
Okay, so this is like this is like the everything. I mean, there's a lot, but so just starting with the mechanics, the way that it works. The way that I work with glass is that the raw materials that I start with are tubes and rods and powders, and then I heat them up, and the tube becomes I basically make it into a blowpipe. So there's a section of the tube that's thicker, and then I pull the part of it that's thinner when it's hot. So it's all one piece, a thicker part of a tube that tapers off to a thinner part of the tube, and it's open on the end. So I set that up, I open the end, and then there are many different techniques of what to do from that point. You can, prepare the glass in many different ways, add color, texture, all of that type of design. And then when it comes time to make the shape, you heat up the glass and literally blow through. You take, the hot end of the tube is, I can actually show you one here since I'm right here. So this is an example of a tube. So I would close it on the end here. And so this area, I would prepare it and make it, beautiful, ready, design-wise. heat it up, and then this end is open. And when
It's
it's
like a
hot,
bulb.
I'm spinning. It's like a bulb, and then as I'm spinning it, because when it's hot, it's liquid, so it's moving and flowing. So you have to spin it just to keep it in place so it doesn't flop down. And while I'm spinning and it's hot, I blow, and that will then expand the glass like a bubble and make the shape. So this, and that's like, most bare bones basic structure of how a piece of glass is blown. So on a spiritual level, and this is one of the first sources that I heard about, it's the first source, it's on page like 16 of Aryeh Kaplan's, Inner Space, 16, 17, something like that. Very early on in our sources, the analogy of a glassblower is brought up to understand the soul of man and how it's connected to its creator. And this is very deep stuff, which I would probably rather you explain it, Rabbi Amichai, but I can say, on a basic level, we have the 5 levels of the soul. And if you look at it in terms of the glassblower analogy, so the highest level of the soul is Yechida, and that's the idea. And then you have the Chaya, which is the person, and then you have the neshama, which I think actually the Yechida, I didn't actually go over this before we spoke. Maybe you can even help me work it through. But you go through these levels of the highest level of the soul is like, it's actually like what the person thinks of to make. And you have the person, and then you bring it through. The person standing there doing the work, I believe, is the neshama. And then you have the ruach, which is the next level of the soul down, which is actually starting from the creator, goes from inside the lungs of the creator, exits and goes through that tube. So there's this transfer. It's relatively direct, but there's a transfer area, the tube. And then it does what it does. The ruach goes in and makes the shape. And in the case of creation of man, it makes the man. It blows in the breath, which is in Hebrew nishima, which is the same root word as neshama, which is the soul. So it's blowing the life and the breath and the life, or that transfer from the creator in through to the vessel, which in this case is the person. And then the nefesh, which is the lowest level of the soul, in the glassblower analogy, that's when the product is complete, like the breath finished what it needed to do. It rests. And then you have a cup or whatever it might be.
Wow.
So
that's beautiful. Let's just recap that for a second. But just before that, it actually says about man being created, it says 2 expressions, vayipach, which is nefichad, which is the breath, but also vayitzer. Vayitzer from the word yetzirah, which is what you're saying, that level of ruach comes from the world of yetzirah, right? We've got nefesh, and then we've got ruach, and then yetzirah is that world. So it exactly is that amazing analogy. So starting off from the highest level of Yechida, that's the inceptional level almost, right? And then Chaya is that dynamic, that surrounding dynamic. The neshama would be the mind, right? Would be the intention, sort of speak. And then the breath is the actual creation which happens. Mm-hmm. And then the resting of it is the nefesh, which is just the way it's birthed into somethingness. So while it's in the state of Yetzirah, it could go in all directions, but until it rests, and I guess you let it cool down, right? It's got to cool down. Right. You got to maybe put it in water. Is that possible? Do you?
No, it would explode.
No, you don't dip it in water. Sorry. Right. Okay.
You don't want to do that.
I don't know that much about glass blowing, but so you just let it rest. So then it forms, then it becomes a shape.
Right. Well, the action is in it's in the ruach part. And I always, when I'm doing a demonstration, I'm showing people glass blowing. I speak and I share a lot about the experience as I go in terms of preparing it and all those phases coming through of, being present, deciding what to do, all of those thoughts, that's internal. And then that moment of blowing, that's what everybody's waiting for. It's called glass blowing. And in that moment, that's when you see the most action. Like everyone's like, oh, she's blowing, she's blowing. Look, like that moment where, like you said, it could do so many things. That's where the action happens. And then basically it's a combination of the breath can only push it into a shape so much, right? It's one breath. At a certain point, it's done. And the glass itself is also cooling off, like you were saying. So both of those things are happening. And then that brings us to the level of nefesh, of rest. There's a created thing, a siya, like it's done, a siti, like it's done. And so that's the real, super action moment in seeing glass blowing is right there, which is part of what I find super interesting about it, which I, already kind of mentioned, is that we have, you think of how close we can be to God, to our creator. And then in a sense, we're so close. And in another sense, it's like, we can't be too close. It's like not even possible to touch or look directly at. These type of ideas come up a lot. So we see it in the glass blowing example very clearly. You have this tube in between. That breath, it does come from the inside of the lungs of the glass blower, and it does move the glass over here when it's hot, but there's an in-between passageway that's totally necessary. I'm definitely not going to blow it directly where it's hot. That's not possible, right? And so this little passageway is everything. It's on one hand, it's connecting the created to the creator, and on the other hand, it's a separation that makes it possible for this connection to happen. So I find that part super interesting.
And so how do you understand that in terms of your own life, or let's say even parenting? I know you're a parent, and and if it's okay to say, you're now a single parent, right? So it's giving that independence, right? And having that space. Like, how do you understand that?
Right. So it's really a very interesting thing. I think there's like the level of, between humanity and God, and there's a level between people, right? So between humanity and God, we have this, we're so connected, that breath that's blown from God into us, which is our soul. We receive it from God. We're connected. And yet there's the experiences in life where it's like, where are you, God? Like, how can I be so connected that every breath that I have is from you, but I can't find you, and I'm always searching. And on a level of between people, between man and man, or parent and child, like you brought up as an example, there always is that place where that in-between place, no matter how close people can become, there's always that space that is, it's you can't understand really what's in another person's heart, right? You can approach it, and if people are really in tune with each other, they can say, like, quote unquote, get on the same wavelength. But that doesn't reveal like everything of that it's not like totally accessible. So like you're saying, in terms of parenting, I do think it's a bit of wisdom of parenting to remember not only that fact that space needs to be given for the child to find themselves and express themselves and make their mistakes and be present for them, sometimes a little bit at a distance, but really, this is it's completely key to developing any relationship. Like if a child learns this, that they can grow and find themselves in an environment that's really, supportive, yet not trying to be totally controlling. So hopefully that'll work itself out in their relationships further in their lives, and keep spreading that type. It's like a level of respect, I would say, even, And there's moments where it's, super frustrating to not be able to understand what another person is saying or not be understood. Like I understand what I'm saying. Why is it not understood by the other? But this is a key element of reality to even just to know that is already comforting. Even just knowing that this is an aspect of how we relate to each other. It's like freeing. It's comforting, but it's also freeing because it makes it like it's okay. It's actually okay that we can't figure everything out inside of another person. That's actually part of the makeup of things, and I can honor that and respect that a person is so beyond and amazing that I can't just take every detail out of them. That's actually an amazing thing to know.
Or impose myself upon them.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
In many ways. But what I was thinking when you were saying that is the difference between chesed and gevura. We were talking about the fire. You were saying originally that fire traditionally is negative, right? And in this way, in this analogy or this craft, we're taking fire and we're using it for constructive purpose. And perhaps in the analogy over here of the glass blower not being too close to the molding, there needs to be the space. That's also the analogy of gevura, of restriction, of saying there's my space, but then there's the other's space, and I cannot impose my ideals upon my child necessarily, right? Or impose myself upon others. That's more like chesed. Chesed is more just, we're all one, we're all connected, and it's true, we are. But there's also the space of gevura. And when it comes also, I think, to a relationship between us and Hashem and the Creator, it's very important to understand that the Creator gives us our independence, and He wants us to really actualize that self. And it could only happen if there is that space. So I think that's like so profound. And having those borders, I think, is like all part of that analogy of gevura, perhaps that whole craft. In many ways, it's ches, but that gevura is really chesed, because the breath is breathing in, it's giving life. But in order to give life, you have to give space.
Right. Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah, I think that's such a amazing, such a fascinating dichotomy, just this contradiction. We want to give life, but we have to hold back. We want to love the person, but we need to have our boundaries.
Right.
That's
and there's a lot of that in glass blowing. There's a lot of like with anything, there's these type of things come up. But if you make a wrong move with glass blowing, it could be dangerous. I mean, at an extreme level, or it just could not work. It could not go right.
Wow.
When I teach, so I've been teaching a lot the past couple of years since Corona kind of took away the tourism. So I've had the time to develop in other ways. And so I've been teaching a lot more. And I feel like it's one of the more important things that I tell my students who want to learn glass blowing, that if you could only imagine like how subtle it is what you need to do. We think we need to push and push and push. We're trained, I don't know, maybe it's the Western world, maybe it's the modern age, whatever it might be. There's this whatever it is, the level that people think they need to push to make something happen, that's not how glass blowing works. It's just not. You have to, in the right moment, you have to make a move, and it's subtle. It's like if you blow too hard, it pops. You don't make a vessel, you popped it. And if you move even the slightest bit, it's off. So you learn this over and over again in a very extreme way, I would say, with glass blowing compared to other things that I've done, at least.
Wow. There's a special hymn on Yom Kippur about the glass blower. In Hebrew, glass blower is zagag, which is an interesting word. That we're in the hands of Hashem, of God, just as the glass is in the hand is in the hands of the glass blower. And it makes sense, like what you were just saying. If the glass blower just gives a little bit too much, it's like, and so with Hashem, with God, even though we don't feel it, we don't know it, but we're in his hands. And that it's a very scary thing for a human to say, like, well, I'm not in control, like, or I have limited control, really. But then it's also comforting if we switch it around and we have the trust with it. We're like, I trust the glass blower. I'm in good hands. So he gives me my whatever it is that I need all the time.
Right.
I'm provided
and
for.
It's very specific.
It's exact.
Yeah, and that comes up with the glass blowing as well. That moment, people always want to know, well, how do you know how hard to blow? This is like one of the things that comes up, and it's with everything getting to that moment. So there's all of the work getting up to that moment, doing everything right. Okay, let's leave that to the side even for now. But once you get right before the moment of blowing, you have to get it just right. Like thinking of like the glass blower, being able to trust the big glass blower, like the Hashem, God. So everything's just right for it to work. The glass needs to be the right heat, hot enough, but not too hot. If it's not hot enough, it won't move. If it's too hot, it starts to mess up the glass. I need to blow at the right moment. I need to stop at the right moment. I need to blow hard enough, but not too hard. All of these aspects, if they're not within that realm, that margin that works, it doesn't work. And so here we are alive, the creation, and okay, we could say there's some issues with how things are working, but it works. Where there's life. The life of the world it's a creation that exists, and honestly, it's one of the things that I think is so unique to Judaism in terms of the perspective, the outlook. It's so positive about life, like we say l'chaim, and we believe in really eternal life, and we know that we're going to get there, and it's at a certain point it's going to be forever. And this is very unique in terms of in relation to a lot of what we hear in terms of apocalypse and people being okay, it's coming to an end, it's so terrible. So we don't think of it that way, and I love that aspect of Judaism. I love that it's really related to this idea that you're saying, that we trust the glass blower, like he's making a beautiful vessel with each and every one of us, and with the bigger picture of all of history. That's what's going on, and as long as we believe that, we're going to get there, and it is going to be beautiful. And it's a beautiful perspective. It's very positive. Yeah.
And even internally, to even feeling that breath of the glass blower within us. So yes, on an external level, everything is going to go okay, and everything is going okay, and we celebrate that. But really internally, and the thought that I was having when you were saying that is that externally we have things that we could say are not where they should be externally. Every person could pick on that. But then if we go a little deeper to that breath, right? And actually this is the second chapter of Tanya, really talks about this, about the soul being that breath, and it's always there, that we already have everything that we need. We already have life. We're already there. We just have to reveal it. It's just listening to the breath of the glass blower that is doing it, like right now, not too hard, not too soft. And it's right there inside of our bodies, right? Yeah. It's in our mind, in our heart. It's beautiful. But I was also thinking, I was thinking that when you were saying like you were saying chesed and the glass blowing, and then the gevura, or we were mentioning that before, but when you were mentioning like it's got to be just right, that's tiferet. That's like this beautiful harmony of just creation, being made in this like harmonious way.
Wow. Nice. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah. Wow. I would say I just want to, it's taking a tiny bit step back, but I think it's related to Tiferet also, is that, this idea that you were saying, if we contemplate a bit that this glass blower's breath is being blown into me every time I breathe, it's a beautiful meditation just to imagine it coming in and going out, and how connected we are in that sense. So that then opens itself up to looking at every other person, every other Jew, every other human. They also are. And so we're all a part of this bigger life system, and it can really take us out of the challenges of relating to others, and realize we're, this person is being blown into life just like I am. And this is, I think it's one of the keys. I think it's one of the big keys to, and one of the, I don't call it a secret or a gem that comes out of this type of work. I always bring that point up in my demonstrations when I'm sharing with people. I think is, it's just right, and it's bringing me to life, and that's so beyond and amazing how perfect and meduyak and beautiful, like harmonious it is.
Wow.
And that's true for you and everyone else who's ever existed also.
It's like that line from Rumi, who was a great Sufi, and Sufism is actually very connected to the Kabbalists in Morocco, and the Sufis really used to, hang out a lot. So Rumi says that we're constantly within the cosmic breath of the Creator, right? We're taking a collective breath at all times, and it's beautiful. It's exactly what you were saying, that collective breath. So let's just take everyone, wherever you are, let's just take a breath right now. An intentional cleansing awareness, just breath, that we are connected all together as humans and as one family of nation, all of one, and connected to that divine godly breath that is breathing existence right now, this second, this moment. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. So that's so cool that you could actually, you do this day in and day out. You exemplify the Creator.
Well, yeah, it's an analogy. It gives
no
us
pressure, no pressure there.
It gives us an example to what I feel like, and I share also in that moment, like, okay, it's cool and amazing to see glassblowing. Everyone, agrees. And a lot of people I've met say, the first time they saw glassblowing when they were a kid, they remember it, and they got so curious. As a child sees a lot of things, but they might not remember the first time they saw each thing. With glassblowing, they often do.
Yeah.
And
it's the fire there.
Yeah, it's just, there's like so much mystery, it's just like so amazing. Yeah. But really that wonder of seeing glass in that moment, like, wow, what is happening? This little person is blowing some air and it's moving glass, this hard, sharp, breakable, unmovable type of a thing. And you're just like, wow, it's so amazing and so beyond. So really what we're being given is a gift of being able to contemplate how awesome life and breath is. That's what's happening there, that the breath is moving the piece and creating the shape. So all of the details around it are truly interesting and incredible. But really what I feel, it's a big gift to me that I do this regularly for myself, that I could even for a split second contemplate like what you just said with this little meditation. Wow, the breath of life is being blown into me and everyone else, and it's so perfect. And it's, even though we're not noticing or thinking about it, it's happening. It's been happening for all of time. It brings everything together. So it could be a very deep hitbonenut, like contemplation, just by seeing glass blowing. And then to me, this is, there's so many things that a person could focus on when they see it. But if you take a little moment to contemplate this, how the breath is in action here, like going through these levels, like we brought up, that's some really good material for a human being. The next thing you know, your mind is open, and your heart is also open to other. You realize we're all connected. You realize the preciousness of life. Okay, everybody knows breath is important and life is precious. Everybody knows that, but we can kick it up a level and a level and a level again and again, probably our whole lives, every day of our lives. How could we ever really grasp such a thing? It's huge. It's beyond. So if we take that little moment of seeing glassblowing, remembering it, okay, so I get to do it each time. It's like, well, I'm not less amazed by it. I've been doing this for like 17 years. It's not boring. I'm not less amazed by it every time I blow glass or I see somebody else do it. It's just like, it's a pele. It's just this wondrous thing, which is a little bit of an awakening to like, how awesome is life?
Yeah. And I kind of get the picture of like, we could use that breath to create amazing creations, or we could use that breath to be angry, perhaps, to waste our time on, just useless talk about, let's say, even others. Like using our breath in the wrong way versus using the breath in the right way. We could create, or we could do the opposite. God forbid, we could destroy, right? And so, exactly. We could, and like we were saying before about fire, it's the same thing. It's constructive fire versus destructive fire. And what we're seeing, I think, in the world is like, people, I mean, fire is a natural component of life, right? Without fire, you have no, we don't have anything, right? So there's so much, we could say, potential there in the world. And then people are maybe not aware of the full extent of that God-given potentiality, that fire that they have to create, to innovate, to help others, to give life to others by giving them a good word, to uplift them, to versus let me slander about this political view or utilize this latest invention for my own egocentric needs and for my clique and ostracizing others, etc. And it really goes back. It's so simple, it's like these, that's what I love about like your practice, and like practice of real artisans are just able to just go back to like very simple truths. It's like, it's not so complicated. We don't need to be geniuses and get like masters and then doctorates and this and then that. It's just like, just go back to the basics,
Yeah, I think it's one of the best decisions, aside from moving to Israel. So that's top. But to choose to work with to choose this seemingly simple. It's not, I mean, okay, you have to learn the skills and practice them and get good at it, but it's working with your hands. And I would say definitely the education that I got didn't necessarily put a lot of value on, working with your hands. That's like a low level. You want to be on a level where you're like ruling the world with your, the press of a button, if you're going to move at all, and really, it's one of the greatest gifts that I would say, like, I gave myself by making that decision, because it keeps me present. The work that I do is I'm literally touching things and moving them. And then each piece that I make, I see it, I see how it turned out. I learn from it. I can use it. I can give it or sell it to somebody else and they can use it. And it's a thing in the world, which is like, it makes me present in the world. It makes
Amazing.
me, it's like literally, I never would have thought, but it's like literally one of the best things, is to work with your hands. It attaches you. It makes you present, basically, in the moment.
Wow. Wow. I've seen your mezuzah cases like around different places in the world, and I'm like, oh, I know that, that's such a cool, just opportunity to have others be a benefit from the work of your creation. So the creation really lives on. And
I do try to keep it in mind, like you were saying before, like what we do with our words, so also our intentions. Like I could say I get my skills really honed in and refined, and I could do all kinds of amazing techniques, etc. But when it comes down to it, there's the energy in the piece that's put into it with the intention of the creator. So I really, just being in Tzfat, first of all, I think we're, it's coming from a special place. But I really do try to put, like a really good thoughts and just simple positivity into it as I'm doing it. And that as I am amazed by this whole process that I'm doing, that goes in it also, that like kind of just like appreciation of life and amazement. And I hope it's felt. I think it is. I think that it comes through, I think
sure.
It's, yeah.
For sure. So Sheva Chaya's gallery is one of the most popular galleries that people visit. With COVID, we've taken a little bit of a hiatus over there, but used to have birthright students coming through, and 1.5 million tourists that used to come through Tzfat, and you're right there at the bottom of the galleries. So it was a really busy time where I remember you just have shifts of people coming through for demonstrations. And so you've really touched thousands of people. That's such an awesome legacy basically to lead to that it's not it, but it's not just the art, it's the intention and it's the lesson behind it, which is so amazing. And what I really love is that it's just like you were saying with the work of your hands, it's just simplified, and it really is simple. We are not so complicated if we allow ourselves to just leave that complication behind,
Right. I think I'll bring up one other little idea that I like to share connected to the glass. I think it's connected to this. So we associate glass with it being fragile and breakable. And you see with glass blowing, with this process of working with it, that it's, yes, both breakable and the most malleable material there is. In fact, when glass is hot, you can't break it. So on one hand, it's the most breakable material. On the other hand, it's not breakable at all. How could it be? So this is a paradox. And it's built into the material, this paradox. And what makes it all work, what makes it all work out is the fire. And the fire, in this case, like we've brought up a few times, so there's the different aspects of fire, the fire that burns and the fire that melts and sticks together and basically also glows. It gives light. So glass is on the side of the fire. It's the fire that heals. It's the fire that connects. It's the fire that literally radiates light. And so this, I think, can be really applied to a lot of our overthinking and being stuck in our brokenness. And it's no secret that there's a lot of brokenness in the collective. Definitely, the collective Jewish people in the collective world, in every individual. There's no doubt that is 100% for sure. But that's not the whole story. That's part of the story. It's just like the glass can be broken. It's also when it's heated up with the flame, it cannot be broken. And so I think this kind of explains or helps us understand how we could still be here, because we have our metaphorical fire, The glass has its fire to keep putting it back together when it's broken, so it becomes sticky and it becomes malleable, and you can blow it and change it. And we have our fire, which is the fire of the Torah, mitzvah, doing something good, good intentions, like we said, thinking something good, like we said. So again, bring it back to, these are deep, big things, but it's very simple when it comes down to it. It's remembering something so essential and simple and real. And this is one thing that we can learn about ourselves from glass. We have an eternal light. We have an eternal flame that is always, quote unquote, fixing us and connecting us and bringing us back to all of the potential in the world to become the form that we should be.
That's so beautiful. Wow. And there's something called elasticity, that we know that our own brains are proven to be elastic, that we could learn a lot more than we think. We could do a lot more than, we think our capacities allow us to do. And I love that analogy that if we allow ourselves in a certain way to be malleable and not breakable, then we take that fire, and that fire that could be perhaps the challenges, could be the brokenness, like you mentioned, instead of viewing it as brokenness, it's an opportunity for me to now become more like God is giving me an opportunity to be bigger than I thought that I really am. And we don't like that. We're like, I don't think I could do this. I'm going to just explode. But we're like, whether or not you like it, this is what you're on, and you're going to be okay. You're going to actually come on the other side. You're going to be better off for it. But I think in a certain way, it's that perspective of, if we think that we're going to shatter, that we're fragile, then we really are. But if we're being molded, then maybe that's a much better way of allowing ourselves to go through whatever it is, and having the faith and having the trust, emunah bitachon, and knowing that the glassblower, Hashem, the source of it, that we're in good hands, and we're expanded. We're getting an upgrade, right?
That's beautiful. And I would bring it back to that's like the between us and God level, and bringing it back to the level of between people. So that fire, part of that fire that keeps us going in the right direction and doing good is the heart that is alive, that has the light of connection in it, and wanting to do good for the world, being altruistic, giving, reaching out, like you said, smiling at someone, giving them some attention. So that's that level of connecting to each other and really loving each other. When it comes down to it, is also, it's like that fire, the warmth of the heart of a yid,
Yeah, totally. Wow. And without that heart, then nothing really happens. We don't have growth. I mean, going back to, there's so many profound ideas over here with all this. This is that is
deep stuff.
Amazing, but it's deep, but it's so simple again.
Right. That's what's so great about it. It just allows us to go beyond just thinking about ourselves and realize that there's something so much bigger. And when I look at another person, that I know we're all part of something bigger. And therefore, as much as I care about myself, I care about another person, ideally. And then if we're coming from that place, everything is going to be really good. We're going to know how to relate to each other and use our time and energy in this world in good ways, because we recognize the value of humanity, of life. And then we treat each other right, and we spend our time in a good way.
Amazing. So Sheva Chaya, what was, we could go on and really just go on this topic of glass blowing and the mystical correlations. I don't know, for quite a while, but I feel like
we did through a few podcasts.
I know exactly. So I was wondering, what was the most interesting experience that you've had in your gallery?
Interesting question. I don't know. There's been so many. It's just like an amazing experience, one after the next. It's like an incredible
something that stands out.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Well, I do have like I don't know if it's the most amazing thing that ever happened, but there's a picture, I'm also a painter. There's a picture that I like to share of Noah's Ark, and I share the story behind it, and I've shared this with, like you said, like thousands of people. And I kind of tell the story. It was a commission piece, and somebody asked me to make it from New Jersey. I tell the story, and it's happened more than once that someone said, I know that person. I know that person who commissioned that painting. There's like that connection level, like going beyond, but really for me, the moments that I love the most, there's a lot of like specific stories, but there's like a general moment that I really love. That moment that I brought up before, where when you blow, there's like these moments where I know it's like action, and I've done this enough times that while I'm doing it, I am focusing on what I'm doing, but I can also kind of peek at the crowd and see their faces. So that's really, really fun, because like, it's not, well, I guess it is almost every day for me when people come, but like that you see people with their like, their jaw dropped, they're just like, like what, this moment of like amazement and wonder. It's just so nice to like grown adults, like it's just seeing this reaction, and people just like, it opens them, it opens them to like this level of expression that's, it's not your day in, day out, it's really special. Yeah. So
that's amazing. I remember when I first saw you, I was like, Sheva Chaya is not, I mean, you're 5'2", maybe. Is that possible?
Yeah, probably.
And so I was like, okay. But then when you got behind the fire, I was like, she's a tough girl. She's, I was like, she's playing with fire. She's like, really, with like the goggles, I was like, don't mess. That was like you were just creating something and with fire, and I mean, I know about not messing too much with women. I've been married for a while, thank God, 20 years. And my wife, the births that of seeing children and seeing that women have this incredible power with what they do, and that creative process is like a very, very powerful process that women have. And I was just wondering, like, there's that, is it like a male dominated type of a world? Is it a female dominated? Because I haven't seen too many females.
Yeah, no, it's definitely male dominated still. There's been, more females getting involved, but it's by far mostly males. And it definitely takes a certain type of personality where you want to deal with this fire. It's like, it's not like a cute light thing at all. It's very serious, and so for me, like you asked in the beginning, if I like fire, so it's helpful. It's part of why it works for me. I'm really just amazed by the fire. I think I love just seeing the light and the different shapes that the fire makes. It's like very intriguing to me, and I like being near a fire. This is just, part of my nature. Because I'm usually cold. It's like, I have my own little furnace next to me. And but yeah, that level of
are you a fire sign?
No, I'm actually a water sign.
Oh, okay.
I'm a water sign.
Interesting.
So it balances me.
Yeah.
So it balances me out, and it's good for me to be near a fire. I myself am not the fire. It's good for me to be near the fire. But having gotten involved with glass blowing, on this level, I see it's not just being near it, like being near it and sitting next to it. It's like working with it, which is actually integrative, I guess, and really amazing. And it's in itself is empowering. I mean, I honestly feel like anything in life could be empowering if you take it the right way, if you look at it the right way, you know, just even taking one breath with consciousness like we did earlier, that's empowering. And you know, like I brought up earlier as well, finding something that you really love, that you really want to do, that your will rises to do it, that you're drawn to it. So this you know, it brings out something of a person to follow this type of thing. And for me, I had no idea that I would get involved with glass blowing at all until I started blowing glass. I tried it once on, you know, we didn't really get through the story, but like basically I tried it once on my way to Israel, once, twice. And I literally like went and met some glass blowers, but I was on my way to Israel. Like I had a flight out of Israel a couple of days later. This was in Washington State.
It takes fire. It takes fire to pursue your dream like that. So you are definitely
right, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, when I get focused on something, I do have like an ultra focus ability, so that really helps. And and I got a little taste of it. I tried it. They let me try it, and I remember I was just learning the Hebrew alphabet really at that point. I have like, you know, there's like that whole side of the story of how I started to learn. But so I remember the first thing I made with glass was the letter Shin, which is like it looks like a flame, and it's the first letter of my name and whatever. So I tried to make a Shin out of glass that first time, and I still have it somewhere. Wow. And then I had a plane to Israel like the next day, and I couldn't, you know, if I was just floating and free, I probably would have stayed there for a month or something, and, you know, hung out and learned glass blowing with these people. They're nice people, and they wouldn't have minded, I don't think. But I had a trip to Israel set up, and I got on that plane thinking, well, that was cool. Glass blowing is really amazing. I wonder if I'm ever going to try that again. And then I came to Israel and got involved in life, learning and getting married, thank God, having kids, thank God. Like all years went by, no glass blowing, and lots of life going on. But I didn't forget about it.
And you lived in Tzfat at the beginning, right?
No, I actually lived in Israel about 7-8 years in the Jerusalem area before moving up to Tzfat. I've been in Israel since basically 98. Wow. And I moved up to Tzfat in 2005. Yeah, so that whole, you know, first phase of being in Israel and starting a family and everything, I continued painting. And I had in the back of my mind, glass blowing, didn't forget about it, but I also think, you know, I had 3 little kids under the age of 5 when I started glass blowing. I was 30 years old. How do you do that? You know, so I guess, you know, we have that phrase, siyata d'shmaya, you get some heavenly help when you need it, I guess. I don't even know how I held on and kept trying. And it's not an easy thing to learn at all. But somehow in between kids and in between, you know, diapers and naps, I would put on the baby monitor on my table and try glass blowing a little bit, like daily, as much as I could. And somehow over the years, I learned it enough to be able to, you know, do things and share it.
Wow. That's amazing. That takes fire.
Yeah, I'm a very determined water sign. So
yeah, you're a Scorpio, right? If I remember.
Scorpio.
Yeah. Scorpios are like the fire of the water signs, in my opinion. They're like more of the
I could see that.
Yeah. Wow. So again, I feel like we could go so deep into these concepts, but I feel there's so much like food for thought, and I love like the analogies of that space of Gevura, and the analogy of the breath, and the analogy of our potential. There's so much there. And once again, it just comes down really in a very simplified way, if we don't overcomplicate things, you know, and just see stop overthinking our own our own brokenness or what is missing and what is that. There's that malleability, right? That the elasticity that that we're being taken to a better place. We're being transformed. We're being changed. And wow. So thank you so much, Sheva Chaya.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would love to ask you maybe what do you feel is your favorite book or teachings, or if it's a Hasidic statement or if it's a Hasidic book that I know that you teach a lot and involved with, steeping yourself in the learning of Hasidut and Kabbalistic concept. So what's your go-to?
I would say there's like the first thing, which goes way back, was one of the first levels that I started to learn was really the importance and how central it is to have joy, and to return to joy, and to find joy, and to act with joy. This I think is the anything that we can do well. So we should do it with joy, and we need to not forget that. It can be, a person can get so over focused on even important things, learning to do something correctly and be the best, and that can be amazing up to a certain level. But then you can imagine doing it with joy. Then we're getting somewhere. And this can be applied on so many levels, back to the broken in wholeness, how we relate to each other, and how we relate to the creator, to the creation. If we're, and why is it such an important point to bring up joy all the time? Why is it such a factor? It comes up in, just about every Hasidus, and that's probably not for no reason, because it's not easy. It doesn't come naturally. It's something that we have to, it's like a muscle that we have to build and integrate and remind ourselves regularly to bring it in and become strong in joy. And I think that in itself is one of the more powerful and important teachings. I think any other teaching that element brought to it just like brings it to a whole new level.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you, Sheva Chaya, so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Many blessings.